Imagine spending an entire day boiling, scrubbing, and wringing your family's clothes by hand, or risking your fingers every time you fed a wet shirt through a mechanical roller. Here are 10 old laundry room features that made wash day a chore. The washboard and galvanized steel tub were the ultimate symbols of grueling wash day labor from the late 19th century into the mid-20th century. Before electric machines took over, women spent hours bent over these heavy metal basins, scrubbing heavily soiled clothes against the corrugated surface of a washboard. These boards were typically made of rigid brass, galvanized iron, or ribbed glass set inside a wooden frame. Doing laundry this way was physically exhausting, requiring immense upper body strength to agitate the water and lift soaking wet fabrics. The rough ridges were notorious for scraping knuckles raw, earning wash day its dreaded reputation. Families would often set up 2 tubs on a wooden bench, one for washing with harsh soaps and one for rinsing. While washboards faded from everyday use with the rise of modern appliances, they surprisingly found a second life as a percussion instrument in traditional folk music. Wringer washing machines revolutionized laundry in the early 20th century, but they introduced a whole new set of hazards to the household. These early electric or gas-powered machines featured a large agitator tub combined with 2 heavy motorized rollers mounted on top to squeeze excess water from the clothes. Operating the wringer required careful coordination, as you had to manually feed heavy, soaking wet garments through the tight rollers. It was a notoriously dangerous appliance, often catching loose hair, clothing, or the fingers of distracted housewives. Because the rollers did not have automatic safety releases in the early days, getting caught in a wringer could cause severe injuries. This danger gave rise to the popular phrase, "put through the wringer," describing a painful or exhausting ordeal. By the 1950s, automatic spin-dry machines largely replaced these hazardous contraptions, making laundry day significantly safer. Copper wash boilers were an essential yet incredibly labor-intensive part of the laundry routine before the invention of hot water heaters and modern sanitizing cycles. These large oval-shaped tubs were usually made of copper or galvanized tin and came with a tight-fitting lid. On wash day, women would haul heavy buckets of water from a pump, fill the boiler, and place it directly over a roaring wood or coal stove. Clothes, particularly heavily soiled work garments and white linens, were boiled in soapy water to lift tough stains and kill bacteria. The process filled the entire kitchen or laundry room with thick, oppressive steam and overwhelming heat, making the house miserable during the summer. Moving the scalding hot boiler off the stove required incredible strength and carried a constant risk of severe burns. Today, these antique copper boilers are highly sought after by collectors for rustic home decor. Sadirons, also known as flat irons, made the task of pressing clothes an absolute test of endurance during the late 1800s and early 1900s. The word sad, in this context, comes from an Old English word meaning solid or heavy, which perfectly describes these cast iron blocks. Because they had no internal heating element, sadirons had to be heated directly on the surface of a hot wood or coal stove. A housewife would typically use a set of 3 irons, keeping 2 hot on the stove while ironing with another. They weighed anywhere from 5 to 9 pounds each, making the simple act of pressing a shirt an intense physical workout. Since the iron's handle would also get dangerously hot, women had to use thick rags or specialized detachable wooden handles to avoid burns. The invention of the lightweight electric iron finally brought an end to this exhausting chore. Homemade lye soap was the standard cleaning agent for laundry long before the colorful boxes of powdered detergent lined supermarket shelves. Making this soap was a grueling chore in itself, typically done outdoors in a large cast iron kettle. Women would collect leftover animal fats and grease from cooking and boil them together with lye extracted from hardwood ashes. The resulting soap was incredibly powerful and highly alkaline, capable of stripping the toughest dirt and grime from heavy work clothes. However, It was also notoriously harsh on the skin, often leaving women's hands cracked, red, and painfully raw after a long day of scrubbing. Because the mixture was rarely exact, a batch with too much lye could even eat holes straight through delicate fabrics. Commercial soap flakes like Rinso eventually replaced homemade lye soap, offering a much gentler and more convenient alternative for the modern American housewife. The washing dolly, sometimes known as a passer or a plunging stick, was a primitive manual agitator that required grueling physical exertion. Before machines could agitate the water mechanically, this wooden tool was the only way to loosen dirt from heavily soiled garments soaking in a deep tub. The dolly typically consisted of a long wooden handle attached to a heavy, carved base with several peg-like legs, resembling a small wooden stool. A person would grasp the handle with both hands and repeatedly plunge, twist, and pound the wet clothes up and down in the soapy water. This repetitive motion was incredibly tiring on the back, shoulders, and arms, often taking hours to get through a single family-sized load of laundry. Some variations featured a copper cone at the bottom, which used suction to pull water through the fabric. The washing dolly quickly vanished once hand-cranked agitators became affordable. Laundry bluing was an essential yet highly frustrating step in the washing process, meant to keep white fabrics from turning yellow or dingy gray. Because early soaps and boiling methods often left white cottons and linens looking dull, housewives would add a very specific amount of blue dye to the final rinse water. The blue pigment tricked the human eye, neutralizing the yellow tones and making the fabrics appear bright, crisp, and snow white. The most famous brand, Mrs. Stewart's Bluing, was a staple in laundry rooms across America for generations. However, using bluing was an incredibly delicate balancing act that required precise measurement and perfect timing. If the bluing liquid was not diluted properly, or if the clothes were left in the rinse water for just a few seconds too long, the entire load would come out permanently stained with bright blue streaks. Modern optical brighteners eventually largely replaced it. Heavy concrete twin utility sinks were a staple in the dark, damp basements of early 20th century homes, serving as the primary station for wash day. These massive, immovable fixtures featured two deep basins cast from solid concrete or soapstone, weighing hundreds of pounds. One basin was dedicated to washing with hot, soapy water, while the adjacent basin was filled with cold water for rinsing out the harsh detergents. Because these sinks were incredibly deep, women had to lean uncomfortably far over the thick, rough edges, leading to severe backaches by the end of the day. The porous, abrasive surface of the concrete also had a tendency to snag delicate fabrics and scrape the skin off knuckles during vigorous scrubbing. Over time, the concrete would inevitably crack, stain, and harbor mildew. By the 1960s, these industrial-looking behemoths were largely replaced by lightweight fiberglass utility sinks that were much easier to clean. Heated rotary ironers, commonly referred to as flatwork mangles, were massive appliances designed to press large linens like bedsheets, tablecloths, and curtains. Introduced in the 1930s and peaking in popularity during the 1950s, these machines consisted of a large padded roller that pressed fabric against a curved, electrically heated metal shoe. While they promised to save time, operating a rotary ironer was a highly skilled and often stressful task. The user had to sit in front of the machine and carefully guide the damp fabric into the roller, using a knee or foot pedal to control the speed and pressure. If the fabric wasn't fed perfectly straight, it would instantly wrinkle, crease, or even scorch under the intense heat. These machines were also incredibly bulky, taking up a massive amount of floor space. As permanent press fabrics became popular in the 1970s, the need for these giant residential ironers completely disappeared. Wooden indoor drying racks were an absolute necessity during the cold winter months, but they turned the entire house into a damp, cluttered obstacle course. Before the invention of the electric tumble dryer, hanging clothes on an outdoor line was impossible in freezing temperatures or pouring rain. To solve this, Families used large, collapsible wooden racks, often setting them up in the kitchen near the warm stove or in the living room by the fireplace. These accordion-style contraptions could hold a surprisingly large amount of laundry, but they completely monopolized the living space for days at a time. As the wet clothes slowly dried indoors, they released a massive amount of moisture into the air, causing windows to fog up and leaving a lingering smell of damp wool. The delicate wooden dowels were also notoriously fragile, frequently snapping under the heavy weight of soaking wet blankets before modern dryers arrived. So, if you had to do laundry the old-fashioned way, which of these tools would you dread using the most? Drop a comment down below to tell us your least favorite household chore.